If only one person were to find their way because of this video, that would make me tremendously happy. In 2019, I reached probably top 3 best shape of my life. I was shredded, I was competing, I had ramped up and really found my groove, and that was on top of the previous 3 years being, pretty high level of fitness. In early 2020, the world was my oyster. I was thinking of what mountains to climb next. Then, as has become incredibly cliche, COVID struck. Real quick, this isn't gonna be any sort of like woulda, coulda, shoulda, pandemic pandering, policy, discussing the politics of everything, none of that. This is really just a personal journey and a personal struggle. So in March 2020, my personal take for fitness was like, okay, well, I've been hitting it pretty hard. I can coast for a couple of weeks, no big deal. Let's just let everything settle. What's a couple of weeks without the gym? We all know what happened next, and by July, I had already gained 20 pounds. By November, I was up to the heaviest I've ever been in my life, which was up 33 pounds from my competition weight. Let me be real quick to say, I witnessed sort of from afar an incredible amount of loss and suffering during the pandemic, and a huge portion of it actually had nothing to do with the virus directly. While that specifically did take a heavy toll on some of my friends and family, a lot of it just ended up being sort of horrific coincidence. In the end, the amount of acute death, suffering, and pain that touched me personally was actually basically zero. I've since bounced back, and my life will more or less return to a normal trajectory forward. I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have escaped the pandemic with essentially only weight gain and anxiety and depression and hopelessness, but otherwise generally intact. But I think there is something to be said for the wreckage that laid in the wake of the pandemic. The compound suffering of those that just kind of withered and toiled through isolation, loneliness, self-harm, and mental collapse. I personally wasn't able to contribute much in terms of the incredibly well-balanced, rational, level-headed, and thoughtful discourse. I am but a lowly gym rat. But now I think there's a lot of work to be done to get us collectively back into fighting shape. To unwrap the layers piled on in the last 2 years that might even convince us that the things we're experiencing now are the default settings we were used to in 2019 and before. And this is simply not so. The data is super clear on this. People, by and large, are mentally and physically worse off than they were 2 years ago. Perhaps you in particular have evaded this outcome, but I would also say don't be too quick to dismiss the trajectory you might have enjoyed if the last 2 years had been spent continuing to climb your mountains rather than falling into a Netflix binging habit. And I'm really trying to come at you with not this sort of like holier than thou fitness guy vibe that you see on social media. Like seriously, I come at this with extreme empathy because I lived it. I ate my feelings. I totally unraveled my habit structure. I pursued pleasure in binging junk food. I justified every bad decision I made and just kept piling on. I would get some momentum just to lose it all again and relapse back to weight gain. This probably happened like a solid 2 or 3 times before I actually hit rock bottom. It took that first 4 months to even realize what was happening. Oh shit, I gained 20 pounds. Whoops. It took another 7 months after that to claw my way back to normal, pull my head out of my ass and try and get back to where I was going. But by the time I started that journey, I was up 33 pounds. It took another 12 months after all of that, the span of 2 years in total, to get back to what I feel is my good baseline status. And now my momentum is sufficiently built back to produce some success going forward. And here's the rub. I do this for a living. I live in a gym. I know exactly what to do. People pay me to tell them what to do. And I crumbled all the same. I guess I'm just like a regular old human dude after all. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. And so what do we do about that? First, watch this again. Really, I need you to think about where you're at and what happened and where you want to be. It took me like 7 takes to get out some of these lines. I was getting choked up with the self-realization of what happened, and it hit me all at once. You kind of need to go through that process. Then lean on your friends, your family, your coworkers, your old workout buddies. Use that home gym you built. Call up your old coach, go for a run, and throw away the junk food. The people in your life want to see you succeed. Ask them for help. Seriously, I can't emphasize how important it is to reflect on these externalities that have imposed themselves on our lives, and thus your health outcomes, and reconcile where you are, how you got there, where you ought to be, had none of this happened at all. If you lived some degree of what I lived, I hope you can get your way back to where you need to go. I finally did, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt that it was worth the struggle. Hang in there, and thanks for having a listen.